Hey there, Math 126 students. I just finished grading exam 2. I'm going to release it. Often students want to meet with me about grades. So for anybody that has those sorts of questions, please watch this. This video is meant for you. I'm going to talk through several scenarios. I'm going to talk about what if somebody currently has a 1.0. Can they still pass? Yes. What if someone currently has a 1.4? Can they still pass? Yes. I'll give some precise values to what I mean by that, like how well you have to do on the final. I don't know how much this helps. It just mostly shows you, yes, there's a lot of hope still to be had. Ultimately, you have to learn this material and for the future courses. And if you need to get a 2.0, you need to be getting above 70% on most things. So we have to take that for what it is. I do want to emphasize I'm not an advisor. Some people only need a 0.7. So for some students, a 0.7 is what is necessary. You get the credit as long as you get a 0.7. Pretty much everyone in the class is going to get a 0.7 or higher. I don't see anyone that's really in danger unless they just don't take the final. So the point, all of you are going to get credit for the course. But a lot of students are also interested in the 2.0 line because the 2.0 line is the grade you need to go to the next course. The 2.0 is doable, but that's what I say it is. Typically our guideline from our department is you have to average above 65% on the exams, which usually means above 70% once you factor in homework. So the rough guide is between 65 and 70%. I do not make that distinction lightly. After the final, that's where I spend like an entire day just looking through everyone that's between 60 and 70%. And I regrade their exams. So because of that, we really don't have to worry about sort of regrades for the final. And then based off of that, I make the decision for where that line is. So no one is close and doesn't pass. So what I mean by that is if we have, if I'm trying to set the line at, 68%, but then I notice there's a couple students that have 67% or 66%, and then there's like nobody, and the next one is 59%. Those are the ones I'm going to look at very carefully to decide. I really shouldn't pass someone that has 59%, but I will err on the side of students. So nobody really ends up with a 1.9. So if you can get yourself close, you're going to get that 2.0. So that's the other piece. The other group of students that always want to talk to me are the students that are worried about getting a 4.0. Now, a 4.0 is an unreasonable expectation, really, at this school. I often say that I know it doesn't feel like it, but there is very little distinction between a 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, and 4.0, even at this school. All of those are exceptional grades. Really, a 3.0 means you've done well in the course. So as I said, priority 1 is I figure out where this is. Priority 2 is I look at this. Then I make a linear scale. So it is not curved in the sense that I have to give a certain median or anything. Usually this is up between 65 and 70%. The reason I'm not telling you a precise number is to give me that flexibility to analyze the grades at the end. Usually this is between 95 and 97%. Again, the reason I'm telling you that is because sometimes I look at the scores and there's a clear distinction of a group of students that's done much better. That doesn't change things very much, those slight distinctions. It just helps me if I have somebody close. Once I make that decision, I make a linear scale. So none of that is made lightly. None of it is to try to keep people back. All right. So that's this grade scale, and here's kind of where it is now at the moment after analyzing the second exam. Second exam went really well for students. I'm not surprised by that. So our numbers are kind of where they normally are at this time. I'm not like skewing it one way or another. Currently the median is 3.3, which is higher than I'm typically allowed to give in the term. All right. I'm just going to use that as a guide. Again, I'll analyze that more carefully at the end of the term. So here's for your calculation what you need to know. So homework and test preps are 25% of your grade. You have midterm 1, midterm 2, and the final. Those are equally weighted. So I pulled up a student. This is not an actual student. It's just close to a student where they have the following scores. I have three. So when I compute the midterm grade, what I do is I take the average of these two and I say, what if the student got the average of those two on the next exam, on the final? I have found that that's the only way to give a fair comparison. And then I compute these numbers. I do 80% times 4, 90% times 21, 34%, and I compute it. So for this student, their midterm average would be a 50.6% in the class. That makes sense because these are really low. There are a couple things that I do, which is at the end of, so that's not great for that student. They're not passing. Can that student still pass? Well, yes, they have control over this last exam and how they do on it. So what are some scenarios? So I ran a few and I saw that, okay, there's three things I do. I will add 5% to this to allow for, let's say someone's missed a few assignments. So this will become 95% after the final. I will drop the two lowest test preps, so this might become 100%. So there's several different bits of grace I already have built in. Finally, I adjust the low exam based off of how much better this is. So let's just say this student gets an 80%. Now the problem is that's not that likely because they didn't do that, but let's just say they get 80%, and I'll run a quick calculation. That in itself will dramatically improve their grade, but I adjust this slightly depending on how much better these other exams are. So I take the two higher exams, the final and the highest midterm, and I adjust this to 70% of those two. So this ends up becoming like a 42. Okay, with all of those policies in place, this student would get a 65%, 65.1. So I would say for this student, they need to get, so they need above 80% on the final. Yeah, that's a big ask because they haven't done well, but it shows that it's not unreachable here. You need that because you can see how low these other exam scores are. Okay, so I just want to make sure students are aware of how the policies will help you. Yes, this person needs above 80% on the final to get above a 2.0. That would be my rough guide to them. That gets them right there. Higher would be better, 90%, whatever, and they can get above 2.0. All right, let's run the same scenario for the next student. So here I have a made-up student that currently has a 1.4. So they did a little better. They have 100% on their test preps. They have 80% on their homework. They got 36% on exam 1. They got 76% on the second exam. So that's good. They did better on that. So currently that student might have a 62%. Let's just say 62% estimating. And I'll move this up slightly. So when I look up there, and the way I computed that is I made the final, the average of those two. They currently have a 1.4. Yeah, they're between these two marks. Can their grade go above a 2.0? Yeah, in fact, it's pretty darn likely for the student as long as the trend continues. So let's take this student, and I'm doing these calculations as I go. So I'm just multiplying those percentages times the weight. This is going to be 76%. And let's say this student gets 70% on the final. And I'll add in the 5% for the homework. Okay, so for this student, so this becomes 85%. This one, they get 70%. So they don't do quite as well on the final as they did on the last midterm. There's a small adjustment to this based off of the average of those two. So this gets bumped up to about a 50%. And this student's course percentages would be a 71%. They comfortably pass. So if I run a couple scenarios here, yeah. So this student, I would say they need, let's make some notes, need above 65% on final to get a 2.0 or better. That seems reasonable to me when you look at this. So that's why I have these policies. I said them on the first day too, but I wanted to explain. It makes sense that this student has to do pretty well in the final because the other two exams really didn't go very well, didn't show that understanding that's necessary to be successful in future courses. This student did much better on the second exam, so they don't have quite as high a bar to get where they need to go. Okay. Then if we sort of go up to somebody that currently has a 2.5, so they have 100%, they have a little more than 100% on the homework because they've done some extra. I'll go through and add that in for everybody when I do the final grades. They got a 62% on the first exam. They got a 90% on the final, so there's someone that did quite a bit better. And they currently have an 82%. By taking the average of those two. That makes sense. 82% is kind of between those two exams plus adding in the homework. 82% puts them at about actually 82% puts them a little higher than a 2.5. Maybe they have like a 2.7, 2.8. So what happens if they do well in the final? So let's plug those numbers in. This is 62%. This is 90. Let's say they continue to do well and they get a 90 on the final. So they get a 90 on the final. That bumps their first midterm very slightly, and they'll end up with an 86%. So some of the policies don't help these people as much, because the policies, the bumping policy is to help those people get to a 2.0. It doesn't really help the people at the top of the grade scale. If you want to get the highest grades, you have to do well on all the exams. But the student still raises their grade quite a bit. They're going to raise it above a 3.2. So if they get 90%, then they raise their grade. So I think I should have had this right. They currently have a 2.627. If they get a 90%, they can raise their grade will end up going above a 3.2, I would say. So they can move about 0.5 spots. Okay, let's say someone else who's gotten kind of an 80% on both exams. I'm just running a few scenarios. They got 92% on the homework, so after I add my 5%, and then I'm going to put these other things in, 0.8. So that current student currently has an 84%, which is about a 3.0. Let's say that student then does a 90% on the final. Now let's say they do really well in the final. They get a 95%. Okay, so that student that gets a 95% right here, they'll move this to about an 88%. They'll end up with about a 3.4 or 3.5. So I don't know how any of that really helps students prepare, but I know that a lot want to sit and talk with me about that. I think it's much better for you just to come talk to me about old exam questions or homework, because talking about your grade is not going to help you do better on the test, and that's what we need to do now. But the main reason I do this is to show that all of these students have hope to still get above a 2.0. So I try to set up my policies so it's possible for that to still happen. It's for some of you, it's not possible maybe to get above a 3.5 or a 3.0, depending on how low your grade is. But you can get to a 2.0. So let's keep getting at it. There's plenty of hope. Let's prepare for the final exam. You know the topics that are there. So let's get after it. And if things don't go well and you don't get a 2.0, talk to an academic advisor. It's not the end of the world. I wanted to get that going for you. All right. Hope that helps.